Isaiah chapter 14 talks about the fall of Satan. And here's what it says. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High God. Now, if you count all those I's in Isaiah 14, there are 5 of them. You know what sin is? It's an I problem. In fact, the middle letter in sin is S what? I. That's the deal. That's the problem. When I choose to go my way and do what I want and what I think, regardless of what God says, that's called sin. And it's an I problem. And Satan had this first of all in all of recorded history, and it took place in, of all places, the place called heaven. Now, sin got its start right there in the heart of Satan. Some people have asked me in the past, well, you know, God could create anybody that he wanted to and anything that he wanted, right? Yes, sir, he could. Well, why did he create people that would not have the ability to sin and angels like Satan that didn't have the ability to sin? Why did he create those kinds of beings instead of people with a free will? The reason he didn't create people like that is because we'd call them robots. If we had no choices in life and no freedom of choice in life, we would be programmed automatons. We would be robots, literally. And so God said, I don't want that. I don't want people to love me and worship me because they have to. I want people to love me and obey me and worship me because they want to. Did you know that's always the way that real, genuine love works? If you have to twist somebody's arm to love you, if you have to push on them to get them to love you, if you have to be persuasive in their life to get them to love you, that's not real love. Real love is when they love you from their heart, not because they have to, but because they want to. And so God made the angels, including Lucifer, as something beautiful and good, but he gave them free will. And Satan was the one who chose of his own free will to rebel against God, and then he exported that to the earth. So it all goes back to him. That's why Jesus said he was the father of all lies, and he's been a liar from the beginning. It all goes back to S-A-T-A-N. Now here's the second thing from Genesis chapter 3. In this book, God also shows us the pleasures of sin, the pleasure of sin. Now Hebrews chapter 11 verse 25 says there is pleasure in sin for anybody know the next word? Season. For a season. In other words, there is temporary pleasure in sin. If that was not true, nobody would ever be tempted. If there wasn't some pleasure to it, something attractive about it, nobody would ever be tempted to do anything wrong. So there is pleasure in sin for a while. But here's the thing. It doesn't take very long before that pleasure fades away. All of a sudden, you start feeling guilty. You start feeling ashamed. You start feeling alienated from God. You start worrying, what if somebody finds out what I said, what I did, where I went? What if somebody finds out about that? And I want you to know all too quickly the pleasure of sin falls away. It just vanishes like that. And it becomes fear and shame and intimidation and alienation from God and from God's people and from everything godly. Sin will always do that. But Satan doesn't tell you that. When he's tempting you, he doesn't say, well, the pleasure that this will bring is only temporary. He says, man, you're going to enjoy this. Boy, this is going to be great. Everybody else is doing it. Nobody's ever going to know. He tells you all those lies when he's tempting you and he's tempting me to sin. And he did the very same thing with Eve and Adam in the garden. He tempted them, and he did the same thing with Jesus, not in a garden, but in the wilderness. Now, it's amazing the contrast there. Adam and Eve in the garden, a place of bounty and beauty. Jesus, the second Adam, that's what the Bible calls him, the second Adam, he came to fulfill all that the first Adam was not able to accomplish through his disobedience. The second Adam, Jesus, was in the wilderness, a place that was barren, a place that was dry, a place that was arid. A total contrast between those two. You know what that really tells me? It tells me that no matter where we are, whether it's a place of bounty like the garden, or we're going through a dry spell like the wilderness where Jesus was, temptation will always be a problem. It will always be there. Satan will tempt you in the good times, the times of plenty, but he'll also tempt you when you're going through the trials and you're going through the valleys and you're going through the wilderness. Temptation in the garden, temptation in the wilderness. Now, how does Satan work this temptation angle? Well, there's a little verse that's tucked away in 1 John chapter 2 and verse 16. Listen to this. It talks about the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And here's what John says about that. This is not from the Father, but in his words, is from the world. This is not from God. When Satan approaches you and me, and he's going to tempt us, whether it's a wilderness experience or a garden experience, he will always approach us in one of these three ways. The lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, or the pride of life. And if you look at the garden, and if you look at the wilderness temptation of Jesus and put them side by side, you can see all three of those approaches in both episodes. First of all, the lust of the flesh. Genesis 3:6. Then the woman Eve saw that the tree was good for food. In other words, it would gratify her physical hunger. It was appealing to the flesh. This is something good for you to eat. It looks good. It looks delicious. It will satisfy your physical desire. It will fill that spiritual and physical hunger in your life. That's what he was talking about to her. It was the lust of the flesh. What about Jesus? The first temptation was to turn the stones into what? Bread. To turn into bread. And I'm sure that Satan probably said to Jesus, hey, Jesus, if you really are the Son of God, actually the Greek word if you are the Son of God, means since. He knew exactly who he was. Since you're the Son of God, why are you walking around hungry? Man, you've had nothing to eat for 40 days. And you got all that power. Just take the stones and turn them to bread. And if you've been to Israel, there's one thing they have a lot of: stones. Stones everywhere, rocks everywhere. And Jesus could have opened up a bread factory, the largest in the world, if he had opened it in Israel. Just turn these stones into bread. Satisfy your physical hunger. Cater to your physical desires. That's called the lust of the flesh. Now, the second area is the lust of the eyes. Now, in the Garden of Eden, the Bible says the fruit was good for food, and then it says this, and it was delightful to look at. It looked good. It was appealing. And it made Eve's mouth water, because apparently the serpent was talking to her primarily in this exchange, even though the Bible clearly says that Adam was there. Apparently he was a silent partner, at least in the beginning stages of the temptation. And she saw that fruit. She said, man, I've got to have that. That is delicious. That's wonderful. Well, what about Jesus in the wilderness? The second temptation was where Satan took him to the pinnacle of the temple, the highest point. And he said to Jesus, cast yourself down. Make yourself look good. The lust of the eyes. If you cast yourself down, Jesus, since you are the Son of God, you know what the Bible says, don't you, Jesus? That God will send angels to swoop you up and rescue you. Imagine the PR you'll get from that. Just cast yourself off the pinnacle of the temple. Make yourself look good. The lust of the eyes. And then what about the pride of life? That's the third area that John talks about. Well, in the Garden of Eden, Satan approached Eve, and he said, if you eat this fruit, it's going to make you wise. Boy, that's an ego trip, isn't it? Because everybody wants to be wise. I don't think anybody wants to go around intentionally and be a dummy. We want to be wise. And so that appealed to her pride, her sense of ego. You can be wise. But he didn't stop there. Satan also said, it will make you like God. It will make you your own God. So you don't have to answer to anybody else. You're going to be your own God. Man, you're going to be the captain of your own fate and your own destiny. Invictus. You'll be that kind of a person. And that appealed to that sense of pride in her life. Well, what about Jesus? Out in the wilderness, the third temptation was that the devil showed him all the kingdoms of the world. Some people say, how could that be? Well, perhaps it was in his mind. Because many times the devil strikes there first of all. But Jesus saw all the kingdoms of the world. And the temptation was, bow before me one time. Just bow before me, Satan said, one time, and all of this will be yours.